Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, it's Vandy. So back into Card 5 Vanguard deck profile. So we guys, don't like, comment, subscribe, let's This time we are covering the second deck for Griphogila or Griphogila, however you choose to call it, and that is Dark States. So Griphogila, as I went over in the previous one for Dragon Empire, is a very interesting deck. Has the grade 10 that kind of broke a lot of people's minds, the fact that we're getting a grade 10, and also just has like the interesting gimmick of revolving around over triggers and standing rear guards, except you have to wait 7 turns to pull it off, and by that time your opponent pretty much knows when you're going to pull it off, so they can beat you very easily if they know what to do. So let's go and go over Dark States, which I want to say is, in my opinion, one of my top 3 favorites. And granted, that's not really saying much considering there's like 5 different builds you can do for Griphogila. I mean, we're kind of like each nation, not each separate consecutive build. But like out of the 5 I've built, it's one of my top 3 because it's just been the most consistent. So let's go and get the start so you can see what I mean. Okay, time for me to dive repetitiveness because we are first covering, of course, our starting Vanguard, Griphogila. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 8k or 6k base. You can have it to a total of 5 cards in your ride deck, made up of this card, 3 Calamity cards, and an over trigger. Then he has the ability, or it has the ability of continuous Vanguard. This unit gets plus 2k for each Calamity card with a different card name in your soul. So if you manage to stack more than, you know, the regular 3 into there, then he gets more and more numbers, which can be very interesting. And I cannot wait for Bushy to make a grade 0 order that allows us to abuse the fuck out of that. And then auto Vanguard at the beginning of your main phase, choose a Calamity card from your ride deck, put it to soul, and then put 3 Calamity cards from your soul that were in the ride deck into the ride deck face up. Search your hand or deck for up to 1 Dragon Tree of Apocalyptic Decimation Griphogila. Write it as stand, and if you search your deck, you shuffle it, and if you roll a card, you choose 2 cards from your rear guards, and you put Dragon Tree markers on each of them. So great, it pretty much does what the entire deck wants. It doesn't make you discard for ride deck, which is amazing. It can hit equal grade power of your opponent's current grade of what they're supposed to be at, which is great. I mean, granted, you can't call rear guards because he doesn't increase his own grade, but you can still guard with higher grades if I remember correctly, and he still gets the normal power level 2, so that's not that bad. And then by just simply getting rid of the 3 Calamity cards you have in your soul, you get a free ride of Griphogila, and then you can get 2 Draco Tree markers, which is amazing because that sets up 2 free 5k beat sticks, and if you call one of your Draco Tree cards, you can make 3 markers and give Griphogila an extra crit. So all around, Griphogila is a great starter. It pretty much does what the entire deck needs in one card, and I'm honestly surprised that it's a fucking common considering like how much it does for the deck and how much it's actually needed. But whatever, it's an amazing card and I love it so much. So one of in the ride deck. Then we have our 3 cards for the ride deck that are not the over trigger, and that would be the 3 Calamity cards I'm going to go over all at the same time. The start of the end being grade 1, Manicious Metamorphosis is the grade 2, and then Looming Demise is the grade 3. So they all have the same exact abilities with different grades, and that is their normal orders, and by playing a counterblast of 1, you can choose 1 Calamity card from your deck, reveal it, put it to hand, show off your deck. So you could technically pick each of them just to add to hand, 1 by 1 obviously. But the issue is, you're not going to put them in your main deck because there's no reason to deck them for it. Watch, I'm wrong, because when this deck eventually becomes meta, it's going to be someone who's running like all of these at 4 ofs just to dick through their deck for triggers, but fair enough. So being able to, you know, I guess send these to Soul for free is great. You can really use whatever you want for their arts, considering they have like 2 different arts, but I went for the whole Griphogila line just because it looks interesting. So yeah, you're not really going to run them in the main deck. Again, watch competitive, prove me wrong, but still. So one of each of them. And you can also, by the way, for the cards that you put into Soul, they can be in any order. So you can do grade 3 to grade 2 to grade 1, or you can do the normal way, grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3. It's up to you, really. And then we move on to our 5 Draco Tree markers. We'll get to the over trigger in a second, and that is just Draco Tree markers. So during your turn, if you have a Vanguard, Draco Tree, or Masquez in its card name, all your units on the circles get plus 5k power. So great. It technically does stack, so if you found a way to put 2 of them on the same circle, which currently is impossible. Actually, there is a way. Yeah, because there's that one Stoicheia order that, Thinking about it, Stoicheia technically has an advantage over everyone else because they have the ability to call while you're at grade 0. Interesting. I feel like I know what the more tournament one's going to be then by that case. I'll experiment with that later maybe, who knows. But, you know, getting 5k to 5 separate rear guards possibly is amazing. Possibly 10 if my theory proves correct. We'll figure that out later. But all around, it's good. It's just an easy 5k, and I like it. So, you know, you want to run 5 of them because you're only going to put them on rear guards once, unless, of course, you're playing Stoicheia and my plan happens to actually work. But we'll figure that out later. Then we have our over trigger in the last card in the ride deck, which is Terrifying Wicked Dragon King, Vanguard. So grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power, over trigger. You may only have one over trigger in your deck. When it reveals a trigger, remove that card, draw a card, choose one music, it's supposed to be made for the turn. And if it during a draft check, activate its additional effect, which you get during your turn. All your Vanguards get plus 10k and a crit to end of this fight. Which is great, because essentially means the Vanguard, who already has double critical and at least 38 power, most likely, or at the very least 23, but if you have the double critical, then it has at least 28, gets another 10k and another crit, so this fucker's swinging for triple triple crit with at least 38 on it, which all around is amazing, and it's a nice over trigger. The issue is that Dark State's over trigger is like the best one to pull early because it has a continuous effect that stays with you for the rest of the game. And by the time you get to the point where you can activate this, you've either already won that very turn or your opponent's dead regardless of the next turn, and this is just a flex on them. So, in my opinion, outside of Keter, because Keter can deck you out, and it's the only over trigger I've lost with so far with the Griphogila, it's the second worst because once you activate this, it's kind of just there for the 1 million because the extra crit and power don't really do anything for you in that scenario, but whatever. Might as well run this in the right deck just because it's fun, and it's also the new over trigger, so might as well give it a chance to shine, right? And then we have our normal triggers, so in total 15 of them, and I do run crits in this one except instead of fronts, and it totally has nothing to do with the grade 0 front trigger being a Diabolos. Definitely not. But also, even if it was, it's still, which it is, it still kind of works better with crits in my opinion. So first up, we run 3 copies of Steam Deviate Dragon, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k power, critical trigger, auto at the end of the battle boosted, put it to soul, choose your units, it gets plus 2k for the turn. Great. The 2k doesn't really matter unless like you have some really weird numbers on board, but then being able to send itself to soul is great because sometimes this deck does run into a soul problem, so being able just to occur soul cards is great as well, and also being a crit adds a little bit more of pressure because apparently people like, I know some people probably have the same thought process I did where let's run defensive cards, but a lot of people believe that because you want to pull off Griphogila, you're not gonna like try to pressure the fuck out of your opponent. Little does everyone know that if you play against me, half the time I'm gonna do something that you don't expect, or I'm gonna do something you do expect and then throw something completely unexpected, and that is swing into a Vanguard knowing that your deck uses a lot of counterblast and willingly give you a double crit to face. They proceed to no guard when they're at 3 damage thinking I don't run crits and then proceed to crit sack them. Like, I don't ever think that you are safe against me unless you know what I'm doing, because even then I don't know what I'm doing. That's the fun part. I'm like Deadpool, except I don't swear nearly as much, and I'm also not as lucky as him. So 3 of Stem David. It's just a good card. And then we have our 8 draw triggers. First, we have 4 copies of Vital Lever, grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 5k power. You can only make this any draw trigger, but because the deck isn't so focused on super soul charge, it's just soul charge as a way to get power, so there's not too much soul charging in it. You can afford to run a lot of draws and not deck yourself out. And then we have 4 draw triggers, obviously, of Arouse Wild Master Riley, grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 4k power, draw 2 cards for poems, Vanguard's grade 3 grades, plus 5k shield. So, you know, it's a 10k shield, which is nice because this deck does want guarding power. Like I said, I've experimented with this one a lot. Natalia isn't really needed in this deck, but if you want to run Natalia for the extra guard power, go ahead and put it over the crit, but I do like running the crit for that extra little bit of surprise pressure, and then the 8 draws to make sure my hand cards stay consistent. And then we run 4 heals and Caper Companion, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power. Standard heal, no special benefit. I don't like the effect heals. I made this clear enough. I just feel like they're way too situational, and especially in a deck where guarding power is super important. Yes, in a meta standpoint, I can see it. Again, I don't pay attention to competitive at all, but if there's a lot of restand decks going around, which by assumption there is, because I know there are a lot of restanding cards per deck, thanks to Bushy, then yes, I suggest you run those effect heals that kind of like deal with that, or like, you know, if a deck's certain meta, then if you're going to run into Griphogila with it, then yes, bring the effect heals that counter the meta. But since I'm playing since I'm playing casually, and I don't like trying to risk it on, you know, is my opponent going to do this at the right time so this heal is actually really useful, or am I going to risk it on the fact that my opponent's not going to do it at the right time, then I'm going to have to drop extra cards to survive. That's why I don't like the counter heals. I know their abilities are good, but they're just way too situational. I'd rather take the standard 15 over a possible 25, but for a long time it's a 10. So I'd rather have the 4 of regular heals for me. Then move on to our grade 1s. First, we run 2 copies of Brother's Soul. So grade 1 normal order, it's just a free soul charge 2. Okay, before everyone starts roasting me, if you're wondering why I'm not running Pandemonium Tactics like Jinky did in the anime, because this deck was kind of based off of Jinky's a little bit, and it is a good card, I will say that. I hate using cards that you cannot use the full ability of. This is why, for so long, anyone that ever said shit about like Barrow or my Barrow decks, the first thing I would look for is do they mention Pandemonium Tactics? Because if they did, then they clearly didn't watch the video. Because, like, I fucking hate using cards I can't use full ability, especially when the ability is Counterblast 1, Soul Charge 4. Then, in like 90% of the card text, if not 99% of the card text, is just explaining the other half of the skill you can't use. I know this, I'm like one of the only people that are bothered by this. If you don't get bothered by it, go ahead, fucking run Pandemonium Tactics. It's fine. But I hate doing stuff like that, so I'd rather run 2 of Brother's Soul and just get the free Soul Charge 2. Like, it's not for the CB. It is just because I hate running cards that I cannot use the full effect of. It bothers me so fucking much. 2 of Brother's Soul. Then we have 2 copies of Avid Heaper, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear, and this unit boost a grade 2 or greater unit. You may still charge 1. I love this card a lot. It has definitely put in it. First, I used it in my trial deck with Dradjeweled, and then I kind of started porting it to my other decks whenever I built like a generic Dark States deck or like just need generic support cards. Because honestly, getting a boost of a grade 2 or greater and gets a free non-mandatory soul charge code. It's a May clause, so you can choose not to soul charge. Is all around good. It's like a free soul charge if you want to, and if you don't want to, fair enough. And the only requirement that is boosted grade 2 or greater units, so it can be Vanguard or Rear Guard. And not to mention the fact that his art just looks cool. Like, I love the blueness on his chest. I love his demon wings. And I love the fact he's a grade 1. He's just so solid. And I would have put him at a 4. In fact, he was until I just decided, you know, maybe 2 of Brother Soul, just in case I run into soul problems. So 2 of Avid Heaper, he helps. He's a battle phase soul charger, increases Brainwash's power a little bit. And not to mention the fact he's not mandatory. So if I'm about to deck out, I don't have to use him. 2 of Avid Heaper. He's just a good grade 2 or grade 1. Then speaking of Brainwash, we have 4 copies of Brainwash Swirler. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto when it's placed on rear guard, soul charge 1. So when it's placed by abilities or just by normal from hand, you get a free soul charge. The downside is mandatory, and I remember there was a game where I lost because I had called Brainwash, not realizing the amount of deck cards I had. It wasn't in this deck, it was something else. And I didn't realize that I had draws left, or I knew I had draws left, and I felt like I was going to sack one that turn. And I had 4 deck cards left, and I was on Barrow. It didn't go through my mind, and I was at 4 after I soul charged. It didn't go through my mind that I was going to deck myself out by swinging with Barrow, but I did. And as I was doing my draft check and I saw the draw trigger, I then realized how many deck cards I have, which by the way was 1 in the moment. So yeah, that wasn't really a good situation for me. And there's other abilities, auto rear guard. When your card is put into your soul by soul charge, if your Vanguard's a grade 3 against plus 5k for the turn. Okay, this card goes as well as it does in my other decks, where one turn it is the strongest thing on the board by a long shot, and afterwards it tends to be between a 13 and 18k booster. So fair enough. Like, it's not bad. It's a free power boost. There is a decent amount of soul charge, like I said. So there's itself, Avid Heaper over here, Brother Soul. But otherwise, it really only hits for like a 13, 18k booster. Shove a Dragon marker on a 23 or 18k booster, which still isn't bad, but like, you know, it only really works well if you're put in a deck that is either hyper dedicated to soul charging or just hyper dedicated to bringing the bullshit out of this card. Either way, it's still solid grade 1 though, and I do like having it, especially in the cases where I am going to go ham on the soul charging to make sure I kill my opponent early. So for Brainwash early, he can be helpful in trying to kill the opponent and put it in the early game, and just has like a nice consistent 13k body, so 4 of. Then we have 4 copies of our Dragon Tree Grade 1 Draco Tree Wretch Demon Strider. So Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto is placed on rear guard. By counterblasting 1, choose any of your rear guards without rear guard circles without Dragon Tree markers on it. Put Dragon Tree marker on it. So great. And then after rear guard once per turn, if you have a Grade 3 or greater Vanguard, by soul blasting 2, choose a Grade 1 or less card from your soul, call to rear guard and send calm as a unit. Now, I've never used that ability because I've never had to, but here's what you can do with it. You can call this, or first off, get a copy of this in soul, call this, get a Dragon Tree marker, Soul Blast 2, get the other copy of it from Soul, because it says grade 1 or less, doesn't have to be a different card, call itself, and because it be called by anywhere, counterblast 1 and get another Dragon Tree marker. And best part is, if you have 2 Soul, you can do it again if you have another copy in there. All-around Demon Strider is great. He's one of I like the ones that can always superior call themselves, or like, you know, just do anything with like Draco Patel, this one, and what was the other one? The Brancate one. I love that all of them can call themselves and essentially get another Draco Tree, because all of them share the same skill where they can be placed by any means to get the Draco Tree marker, which is great. So I do love Strider a lot. Gets a Draco Tree marker for a simple cost of a counterblast, which isn't really used that much in this deck, and not to mention the fact that it can just call another copy of itself from Soul and or Brainwash just to or like half the Soul cost, I guess. So all around, it's a solid grade 1. I like it a lot. It's just a good 4 of. I think it's good. And then we have our PG and Repelled Malice Dragon. Give me a second to clear it though. Grade 1 boost, 0 show, 6k base, continuing Sentinel. You may have a performance in deck, and also card circle. Choose one units, it cannot be hit in battle. And if your hand is true, more cards, choose a card from discard it. So on a PG, now specified, which means if this only one card's in your hand, you place it on guard circle, you don't have discard one, which is great, because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game, or what in this deck calls the early game, first grade 10 turn. You can proceed to rush your opponent down extremely, and then if they counterattack, because that will probably happen, you're going to defend your ass off. How I see PGs in Griphogila is either, if you play one on the first turn, you are probably fucked unless you manage to trigger stack like you're the anime's main character, and or the anime villain not fighting the main character for the final time, one of the two. Or you don't play your PGs at all until the last turn, or before you go over trigger on the opponent, and you just stall with those. All around, Repelled Malice is a solid PG. You can use, I've always, Rescue Hate Dragon, that's the other one. You can use either PG if you want to because they both have the same skill, being able to defend you last minute scenarios if you're out of hand cards or like you don't want to discard anything. It's just solid PG. I like it a lot, and it's the new PG, so that's why I chose to run it with this one. And if you're wondering why I don't run the Blitz PG, it's because the Blitz PG is not a unit, and there are like I'm gonna say this, especially in Griphogila, I have learned, or I've always known this, but in Griphogila I've learned this comes up more often than normal. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and sometimes desperate measures involves calling a PG and doing a convoluted combo skill that ends up working out in your favor. Trust me, you'll know it when you do it if you play my decks to the letter, because you will definitely run into it, especially if you play like me. 4 Repelled Mouse, solid PG. Then we have our grade 2s. First up, 3 copies of the grade 2 who is only here because I feel like I have an obligation to at least test out one of these fuckers, and that is Clean Sweep Dragon. Grade 2 intercept, 5k shield, 10k base, active rear guard, once per turn if you persona road this turn. By counterblasting 1 to 3 cards between you and your opponent's rear guards, and your opponent sends them to, and you and your opponent send them to their respective souls, and this unit gets plus 5k power for each card sent to the soul. And then if you persona road, it's active like outside of normal ride. Like say for example you played the Regalia piece that activates persona ride, it will still go off. Now here's the thing, I'm not saying this card is bad, because I do like it. I think it's an amazing skill because it never says you have to pick both players. You can just choose to pick all 3 of your opponent's rear guards and then send them to soul so your opponent's losing cards, and that's great. Here's my issue with this. He only shows up the turn after I persona ride. He always does this. Every game I play with this deck, he never shows up until after I persona ride, and then I don't draw a persona ride for the rest of the game because either the turn after his final turn or because I just don't draw my other persona rides. I don't know why. I think Clean Sweep just hates me. That's why he's still here. Because if I can get him off, that's essentially a CB1, get rid of 3 free rear guards, and add 15 to him. Like, that's great. Plus a possible Dragon Tree marker, so he's a 33 or 30k base. But, or 40k actually, because Persona Ride. But because I just don't have the luck with him, I'm so tempted to cut him. But I keep him here because I know he can be useful. I just need to wait it out. He's like Harmona. When I need him, he won't show up. I mean, then again, he also might be a curse in the deck like Harmona was, but I have faith in this one because I also don't have better options for grade 2. So 3 up Clean Sweep. You better show up next time when I need you, bitch. Listen, you better show up. You know what I mean. And then we have 3 copies of Steam Artist Napier, grade 2 NSF 5k shield, 10k base. Literally the only reason why this deck's focused on soul charging, I swear to you, it's not even because Brainwash. The only reason this deck has any form of soul charging is because I realized this requires soul for its skill. Continues guard circle if your soul has 5 or more cards against plus 5k shield. So 10k shield, which is great. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. It's easy 10 as long as your soul count is above 5, which sometimes, and that's what I mean by soul problem. What I meant by soul problem earlier is not being at 0 soul unless you just spam this fucker 24/7. It's not being at 5. That was my issue. That's what I meant. Not being at 5. Preferably 7 because of what you saw what the next card was. But not being at 5 is when I call it a problem. Because the 5k shield is very important. So being able to guard is nice. And I do like her. She works in for the early game if you want to call her. So solid 3 of, because you don't want to see too many of her, especially if your soul isn't going to hit 5. Then we have 4 copies of Steam Mage Ashura Dar. So grade 2 5k shield, 10k base, continues guard circle. If your soul has 7 more cards, gets plus 5k shield. Okay, that never happens for me, but if you can get to 7, good for you. And then I'll just retire from guard circle, you may put this card to soul. Okay, that's why it's at 4 and not this one, because it can also send itself to soul, therefore increasing the count for its other copies and for this one. And that's why I like Steam Ashura Dar. It's just a solid, good grade 2. It can get extra shield, but even if it can't, it at least sets up soul to possibly get us more extra shield. And that's why it's here. Good card, 4 of. And then we have our last card on the deck, and that is 4 copies of Dragon Tree of Eclectic Decimation Griphogila, or Griphogila as I choose to call it. Grade 10, Twin Drive, Persona Ride, 13k base. This Yamigato knockoff, I forgot the bit I was going for, so I'm just gonna stop there. Well, I don't remember what I said about in the fucking Dragon Empire episode. I just remember I called it something looking motherfucker based off of the joke from like someone watching Yu-Gi-Oh! GX the abridged, or not the abridged, or just Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and just said, this Tarzan looking motherfucker, and I don't, or like something else along those lines. Anyways, has 2 abilities. Continues Vanguard during turn. For this unit gets plus 5k power for each Dragon Tree mark on your rear guard. So thanks to Griffo Seed down here, if I can get back to him, you get a guaranteed plus 10 just by riding him, which is great. And then if you have 3 or more, he gets an extra crit. So, you know, if you have 3 or more, he's at least a 28k double critical beat stick, which is all around nice to have. And then auto Vanguard, once per turn, when he attacks a Vanguard, choose a face of Calamity card from your ride deck and remove it from the game. So, again, you can do it in any order. So if you want to do it grade 3s first, you can. But if you want to do it like the normal order, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, then you can. You remove it from the game. game. Then, if you did not remove a card, choose an over trigger from your ride deck, reveal it, and then activate all its trigger effects, additional effects, remove from the game, stand all of your rear guards with Dragon Tree markers on their circles. So, first up, over. So after going 3 turns of removing Calamity cards, essentially being a possible double crit vanilla, over trigger, your opponent's probably dead this turn because you're also standing most of your board, or at least the front 2 rear guard circles. And then if by some miracle they live, not only do they have to deal with the fact you have access to the over's ability with most likely this thing at least 4 Dragon Tree markers, at the very least 3, but also, it has been confirmed by Bushy that even if you don't remove an over trigger, you can still stand your shit. So even if by some miracle you survive the over trigger turn, if you don't kill them on the following turn, you are definitely dead the next turn. God, I don't know how you survived the first turn, but you definitely ain't surviving this one. So all around, it's pretty great. It does take a lot of stall game to get there, and that's why I do hate it, because I feel like the game is boring, especially like the anime's adaptation of it. God, the anime adaptation pissed me off so much because it was just so fucking boring watching. But it's good because it can just like stall it out, and if you're damage starving your opponent, then okay, it's a little bit easier depending on what you are. Or if you're me, just swing into your opponent, they will never see it coming because they expect people to try to cower it out of it and not swing into Vanguard, and then they just die to an instant Vanguard attack because they don't expect the triple crit. And then, you get your over, you bully them to hell, and then they probably die that same turn. All around, Griphogila is great once you get to that final turn, I expect, but until then, if your whole purpose is just to pull off his first skill, or like his over trigger skill, you're going to be there for a while. But I do suggest using this first skill to bully the fuck out of your opponent, because I promise you, it's so fun. Like, if you can get the extra crit on first grade 3 turn, do it, or first grade 10 turn, do it. Bully the fuck out of them, because they will struggle hard to survive you. Solid 4 of Griphogila. And that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. This is my second deck profile on Griphogila. I have not felt the burnout yet, but something tells me I'm going to get burnout by the end of this loop, so we'll figure out then. So either way, I hope you guys enjoyed. All around, it's an interesting deck. Like I said, it's one of my top 3 favorites it's one of my 3 favorites of the 3 Griphogila decks I've made. Being able to have a possible nuke 3, getting a decent amount of soul chargers, having one of the 3 ways to actually call out more of the Dragon Tree cards very easily, and just feeling like really balanced and consistent, even though some cards choose not to show up until the worst possible timing, you fucking son of a bitch. So, without further ado, I'm gonna end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me what you guys' version of the Dark Space build is. Is it similar? Is it not similar? What do you guys think of it? So, I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join us, quick follow Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to stand up your Vanguards.